recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no
it's a very simple question. Did it come from? It's a very simple
or,
question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the combatant.
Okay, so everyone knows it's Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah, what was the classification marking? Because
again, classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum.
You can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not
okay,
trying to say anything.
That's what I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
As I pointed out at the time...
you said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
What you just witnessed in that hearing wasn't oversight, it was a slow, methodical exposure of how power dodges responsibility when the stakes get uncomfortable. Seth Moulton didn't come in swinging wildly. He came in with precision, with a single thread, and he pulled it until the entire narrative started to unravel. The question was simple on its face. Did the launch time for active combat operations F-18s flying into hostile airspace get shared on an unclassified signal chat? That's not a complicated legal puzzle. That's a yes or no. And yet Pete Hegseth couldn't give one. Instead, what you saw was a textbook case of evasion dressed up as authority. I can't discuss that. That's classified. I won't comment on how I communicate. But here's where it gets devastating. In trying to avoid confirming classification, Hegseth boxed himself in. Because the moment he acknowledged that information from Central Command is inherently sensitive, implicitly classified, he essentially validated the very concern he was trying to dodge. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim the information is too sensitive to discuss and simultaneously pretend it was harmless enough to drop into an unsecured chat. That contradiction is the story, and Moulton knew it. He didn't need Hegseth to confess, he just needed him to keep talking. And every deflection, every sidestep, every non-answer painted a clearer picture than any admission ever could. This wasn't about a slip-up. This was about whether the people in charge of national security are playing by the same rules they impose on everyone else. Because if a junior officer had done this, if anyone lower in the chain had taken potentially classified operational details and shared them on an unclassified platform, we wouldn't be having a philosophical debate. There would be consequences. Immediate ones, careers ended, clear accountability, but here at the highest level, accountability suddenly becomes flexible, conditional, optional, and that's what made this moment so uncomfortable to watch, not because it was chaotic, but because it was controlled. Moulton asked the same question again and again, calmly, directly, forcing the gap between what should be answered and what actually was. And in that gap, you saw something far more revealing than any document, a system where responsibility becomes abstract the closer you get to power.
As I said at the time, Congressman, there were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
Okay, so if it comes back that it is classified, will you take accountability or not? We've already established, you've already admitted that it was classified because everything you get from CENTCOM is classified. You just explained that to me. That's how you justified not answering the question.
Not what I said. I didn't didn't confirm any classification or
Okay, so if it is
what I know
confirmed,
is that
will you take
everything I
accountability?
share, everything I talk about,
Mr.
as
Secretary,
of
does
Defense
accountability apply to you or not?
is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me or not?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary. at the
And you know
Pentagon.
what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our
I'm
ship
just asking if it applies
very
to you.
successfully.
I'm not asking about the
previous
Houthis.
administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on
I'm
the
just
battlefield,
asking about
we
I
actually
reclaim my
put them
time.
in a place
I
where
reclaim
they
my time.
called for a ceasefire.
I claim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question. We use leadership by
Of
example.
course, unlike, I serve at the pleasure of the president like everybody else does.
So it only applies to the president, not to you.
I serve at the pleasure.
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told
the
it's
sea.
several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S. flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration.
The answer
we
is
had
zero.
Military vessels transit.
No, I didn't ask
just
about
this
military
week.
vessels. I
Well, which
asked
would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
How many
civilian and
commercial vessels?
transit,
It's been several weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have
Well,
transited the
would
Red
you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships
The
through
questions
dam
are not to
before
me,
military
Mr. Secretary,
ships?
they're to you.
We have responsibly put military
The answer
ships
is zero.
through first.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was...
they all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
No, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just
of
asking
a
you
leader
why.
that we
And
need
you
at
probably
this
learned
time.
at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we want
Why
better
did you
representation
fire
in
him?
each and every of those.
You can't
each and
explain
every
why
one
you
of those
fired any of
places.
them?
Gentlemen's time's expired, Chair, and I
And then it gets even more troubling because the conversation doesn't stop at classification. It widens into a full-blown indictment of leadership itself. Moulton pivots, and suddenly we're talking about accountability in the simplest terms possible. If the Inspector General confirms wrongdoing, will you take responsibility? Again, this should be easy, yes or no. But once again, there's nothing. No commitment, no ownership. Just a rhetorical fog about serving at the pleasure of the president, as if that somehow answers the question. It doesn't. It sidesteps it entirely. And what that signals is something deeper than one official dodging one question. It signals a culture where accountability flows downward, never upward, where consequences exist, but only for those without power. And while that's unfolding, we get hit with another layer, the so-called successful operation against the Houthis. Hundreds of millions, possibly close to $1 billion spent on missiles, deployments, and military force. And what's the measurable outcome? 0 U.S. flagged commercial ships returning to the Red Sea. 0. Let that sink in. Because that's the difference between tactical success and strategic reality. You can hit targets, you can launch strikes, you can declare victory from a podium, but if the fundamental objective restoring safe commercial transit hasn't been achieved, then what exactly are we calling success? And when Moulton pushes further, asking about the firing of 8 generals and admirals, the pattern repeats itself. No clear answers, no specific reasons, just vague references to presidential authority and better representation. That's not leadership, that's opacity. That's decision-making without explanation, power without transparency. And when you stack all of this together, the evasion on classified information, the refusal to commit to accountability, the massive spending with questionable results, and the unexplained purge of senior military leadership, you start to see the bigger picture. This isn't about one hearing. This is about a system that increasingly resists scrutiny, where answers are replaced with talking points, and where the burden of proof seems to disappear the higher you climb. What Moulton exposed wasn't just inconsistency, it was a pattern. And once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it.